Today, we're jumping into the world of Jemima Way's debut novel, The Original Daughter.
Yeah, and we're kind of guiding ourselves through it using this really insightful reflection piece, Se pegó el texto, which dives deep into the novel's big ideas.
Exactly. So think of this less like a standard book review and more like us, trying to peel back the layers of Way's story. We're talking family stuff, identity, ambition, all playing out in Singapore in the early 2000s.
Right, and the goal here, our mission, is really to pull out the key insights from that reflection on the novel.
And see what clicks for you, what resonates with your own experiences wherever you happen to be listening.
So, okay, coming of age. It's a familiar theme in literature, isn't it? But what makes The Original Daughter feel, well, different, according to this reflection?
Well, one of the first things that really jumps out from the piece is how Way kind of sidesteps the usual high-drama teenage angst narrative.
Okay.
Instead, it's framed as much more internal. The reflection calls it a quieter, more introspective journey.
Quieter. I like that. So less about big, dramatic acts of rebellion.
Yeah, exactly. More about the subtle shifts happening inside, the small battles. And I think that's a key insight right there. Sometimes the biggest struggles when you're growing up are those internal ones, right? Pushing against expectations, figuring yourself out, not necessarily smashing things.
That internal focus feels really key. The reflection talks about these small internal revolutions. It's like the main character is just observing, taking in the world the unspoken rules, and then starting to question them, but quietly, in her own mind.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how many of our own big shifts were actually these quiet moments of rethinking things rather than some grand declaration.
Totally. And a huge part of that internal world, at least according to our source material, is the intense focus on doing well in school in this Singaporean setting.
Oh, definitely. The reflection makes it super clear that doing well academically isn't just, about getting good grades. It's almost tied into your basic worth as a person.
Wow, yeah. That creates a very specific kind of pressure, doesn't it?
For sure.
It's not just about what you want, but about measuring up to this ideal that society's kind of handed you.
Yeah.
It makes you think about, well, how our own environments shape those invisible yardsticks we use on ourselves.
Absolutely.
Now, the reflection also spends some time on the female relationships in the book. Says they're pretty central.
Yes, definitely. There's this bond between two girls that the reflection calls the emotional anchor of the whole story.
It's an anchor.
Yeah, and it's described as, well, really intimate, but also complicated, layered with love, loyalty, but also maybe some competition, unspoken hurts.
Yeah.
All that stuff that makes close relationships so real.
And what sounds fascinating is how the reflection points out the realism there, how it mirrors the way our actual relationships often work. So much meaning is packed into the silences, right? The small choices.
Totally. And it apparently conveys all this emotional depth without needing huge dramatic scenes. It's more subtle.
Which makes you think about your own friendships, maybe. How much understanding exists just beneath the surface, unsaid.
Yeah, definitely. And that realism seems tied to the setting, too. Early 2000s, working class Singapore. The reflection notes this isn't a side of Singapore you see depicted all that often.
Right. So Wei is really bringing this specific time, place, this community to life. Focusing on their particular, dreams and worries and values.
And this is really important. The reflection stresses this. Even though the setting is specific, the core feelings are things most people can probably relate to.
Like what sort of feelings?
Well, like feeling a bit like an outsider, maybe.
Yeah.
Or constantly comparing yourself to others, worrying you're not good enough, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Those are definitely universal anxiety, things that cut across cultures.
Exactly. And the way Wei writes, her style seems crucial to getting those feelings across. That's something the reflection really highlights.
How so? What's the style like?
It's described as precise and restrained, yet emotionally potent.
Okay. Precise but potent. Interesting combination.
Yeah, like she creates impact through what's not said, almost, letting you feel the weight of things left unspoken. It's about subtlety.
That makes sense. Sometimes what isn't said speaks loudest.
Right. And the reflection also mentions her descriptions of place, vivid but not overly flowery, so it feels real. And the dialogue apparently sounds very natural, very true to life.
It sounds like a book that asks you to slow down a bit, to really pay attention.
Yeah, exactly. To absorb the nuances, maybe reflect on your own stuff along the way.
Okay, so let's dig into ambition and identity a bit more. The reflection brings up this idea of, society having these set paths for people.
Yeah, study hard, get the good job, succeed in this very defined way.
And what the novel seems to explore, based on this reflection, is what happens when you don't quite fit that mold. Or maybe you just don't know what you want.
Right. What if you want something different, or you're just confused? The reflection touches on that complexity.
It calls it the quiet rebellion of self-doubt.
Ooh, I like that phrase.
Me too. It suggests it takes real courage just to consider other ways of being fulfilled, other ways of belonging, especially when the main road seems so clearly marked.
It really prompts you to think, haven't we all had those moments? Quietly questioning the script we've been given.
Absolutely. And tied into all this internal questioning is how the novel treats memory. The reflection points out that memory isn't like a perfect recording in this book.
Not fixed.
Exactly. It's shown as fluid, interpreted, and often contested.
So the act of remembering for the protagonist is also an act of making sense of things, of interpreting the past to understand herself now.
Precisely. Which gives the book, according to the reflection, this sort of reflective, almost memoir-like feel, but without being overly sentimental about it.
It's about the work of understanding your past, not just replaying it.
Yeah. And it makes you think about your own memories, doesn't it? How they've maybe shifted or changed meaning over time, what those changes tell you.
Definitely food for thought there. So pulling it all together, what's the big picture view of the original daughter coming from this reflection?
Well, it's really positioned as something quite different from a lot of maybe louder, faster-paced stories out there.
Okay.
The reflection uses words like slow burning, emotionally intelligent, painting it as this really nuanced look at growing up, finding yourself, and the connections that shape us.
It sounds like a book that trusts the reader, trusts you to pick up on the subtleties, to feel things deeply without being told exactly what to feel.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. The reflection says it trusts its readers to feel deeply and pay attention.
So the final word from the reflection seems to be that the original daughter manages to be both very specific to its time and place,
yet emotionally really expansive. It resonates much more broadly. And it announces Jemima Way as, well, a really significant new voice to pay attention to in fiction.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive into this reflection on the original daughter, the main takeaway really seems to be this. Way gives us this incredibly subtle, nuanced exploration of finding yourself, set very specifically in early 2000s Singapore. But the core themes that search for identity, dealing with ambition, the absolute messiness and importance of relationships, those things speak to all of us, right? They're universal.
Absolutely. And maybe, as a final thought for you listening, think about those quiet revolutions in your own life.
Yeah.
Those moments of quiet questioning. Think about the stories you maybe internalized about who you were supposed to be, the paths you felt you should take. What if you re-looked at some of your own memories? Maybe even the small, seemingly insignificant ones. Could interpreting them differently give you a new perspective on your own journey?